The emergency klaxon screamed through the corridors of Research Station Titan 7 as Marcus Chen raced toward the observation deck. His boots hammered against the metal grating, each step echoing his racing heartbeat. 3 days ago, they had detected the anomaly. 2 days ago, it had started moving toward Earth. Today, it had arrived at their doorstep. Chen, get to the observation deck. Now. Dr. Sarah Reeves's voice crackled through his comm unit, barely audible over the alarms. Marcus burst through the airlock doors and stopped dead in his tracks. Through the reinforced viewport, a massive crystalline structure hung motionless in space, its surface pulsing with an otherworldly blue light. The ship, if it was a ship, defied everything humanity knew about physics. It seemed to be made of living crystal, its faceted surface breathing like a sleeping giant. "My God," Marcus whispered, his breath fogging the glass. "It's been sitting there for 6 hours," Sarah said, appearing beside him. Her usually perfect blonde hair was disheveled, and dark circles ringed her eyes. "No response to any of our communications. No hostile actions. It's just waiting." Commander Harrison Blake, a grizzled veteran of the Mars colonial wars, stood at the central console with his arms crossed. His weathered face bore the expression of a man who had seen too much death to be impressed by pretty lights. "Waiting for what?" Blake growled. "An invitation to tea?" The question hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Marcus adjusted his glasses and pulled up the sensor readings on his tablet. The electromagnetic signatures were unlike anything in their databases. The energy output was minimal, but the patterns suggested something vast and complex was happening inside that crystal shell. "The structure is approximately 2 kilometers in length," Marcus reported, his voice steadying as he fell into the familiar rhythm of scientific analysis. "Mass readings are inconsistent. Sometimes it registers as almost weightless, other times as dense as a neutron star. The material appears to be some form of programmable matter." "Programmable matter?" Sarah leaned closer, her green eyes bright with curiosity despite the exhaustion. "You mean it can change its own molecular structure?" Before Marcus could answer, the lights in the observation deck dimmed. The humming of the station's systems grew quiet. Even the emergency klaxons fell silent. In the sudden stillness, they could hear their own breathing, their own heartbeats. Then the crystal ship moved. It didn't accelerate or change course. One moment it was a kilometer away, the next it was directly outside their viewport. So close that Marcus could see individual facets in its surface. The transition was instant, impossible, and utterly silent. "How did it?" Blake started to say. A new voice cut through the air, melodious and unmistakably feminine, speaking perfect English, with an accent that seemed to carry the music of distant stars. "Please do not be afraid. I come seeking understanding." The 3 humans stood frozen, staring at the crystal ship. The voice had come from everywhere and nowhere, resonating through the station's hull itself. "I am Zara of the Ethereal Collective. I have traveled far to meet the species that calls itself human. May I come aboard your vessel?" Blake's hand moved instinctively toward his sidearm. "Like hell you can. We don't even know what you are." "Commander," Marcus said quietly, never taking his eyes off the alien ship. "If they wanted to destroy us, I don't think they'd ask permission first." Sarah stepped closer to the viewport, her palm pressed against the glass. "Zara, that's your name? You speak our language remarkably well. I have been listening to your transmissions for many cycles," the voice replied, and Marcus could swear he heard a note of loneliness in it. "Your species fascinates me. You are so different from what we expected." "Different how?" Sarah asked. There was a pause, as if the alien was choosing her words carefully. "You love in ways we had forgotten were possible. You fight for each other, even strangers. You create beauty for no other reason than the joy it brings. We thought such things were myths." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Something in that voice, in those words, suggested a story far larger and more tragic than he had imagined. "You may come aboard," he said, ignoring Blake's sharp look. But slowly, and with respect for the fact that we're just as afraid as you might be. The crystal ship pulsed brighter for a moment, and when the light faded, a section of the station's hull simply wasn't there anymore, not melted or cut away, just gone as if it had never existed. In its place was a corridor of the same living crystal, seamlessly connected to their metal hallways. A figure began walking toward them down that impossible corridor. She was tall, perhaps 7 feet, with skin that seemed to be made of the same crystalline material as her ship, but soft and translucent like liquid moonlight. Her features were elegant and alien, yet somehow unmistakably feminine. Long, flowing hair that moved as if underwater fell past her shoulders, shifting between silver and deep blue. Her eyes were the most startling feature, large, luminous, and filled with an ancient sadness that made Marcus's chest ache just looking at her. She wore a garment that seemed to be woven from starlight itself, clinging to her tall, graceful form. When she moved, small sparkles of light trailed behind her like fallen stars. "I am Zara," she said, her voice now coming from her own lips, though it still carried that otherworldly resonance. "Thank you for allowing me passage." Blake kept his hand on his weapon. "State your intentions." Zara's luminous eyes fixed on him, and for a moment Marcus saw something flicker across her features. Not anger, but a deep, weary understanding. "I come seeking something my people have lost," she said. "Something we discovered too late that we needed. We have traveled the galaxy for 1,000 of your years, searching, and in humanity, we may have finally found it." "Found what?" Sarah asked, stepping closer despite Blake's warning gesture. Zara's gaze shifted between the three of them, lingering longest on Marcus. When she spoke, her words would change everything they thought they knew about the universe. "We have found the capacity for true emotional bond, what you call love, what we abandoned in our pursuit of perfection, and what we now realize is the only thing that can save us from extinction." The crystal corridor behind her began to pulse with soft light, and Marcus could see other figures moving in the distance. More of Zara's people, waiting to see if humanity would be their salvation or their doom. Chapter 2. The Price of Perfection. The station's main conference room had never felt smaller. Zara sat at the head of the table, her crystalline form casting prismatic patterns on the walls as the overhead lights passed through her translucent skin. Marcus found himself stealing glances at her, fascinated by the way her features seemed to shift slightly, as if her physical form was still deciding what it wanted to be. Blake paced behind his chair like a caged animal. "So let me get this straight. Your entire species gave up emotions to become smarter and stronger, and now you're dying because of it?" "It is more complex than that," Zara replied, her voice carrying harmonics that human vocal cords could never produce. "We did not simply abandon emotions, we evolved beyond them, or so we believed." Sarah leaned forward, her scientific curiosity overriding her caution. "What do you mean, evolved beyond them? How is that even possible?" Zara's eyes dimmed slightly, and Marcus noticed her hands, delicate and long-fingered, trembled almost imperceptibly. "My people, the ethereal collective, achieved what we called the Great Synthesis 3,000 of your years ago. We merged our consciousness with quantum processing matrices, allowing us to think and process information at speeds your minds cannot comprehend. We eliminated what we saw as the inefficiencies of biological existence: pain, fear, anger, jealousy, and love," Marcus said quietly. Zara turned to look at him, and the sadness in her luminous eyes deepened. "Yes, love. We thought it was merely a biological imperative for reproduction and species survival. We found more efficient ways to ensure our continuation." Blake stopped pacing. "So what's the problem? Sounds like you got everything you wanted." "The problem," Zara said, standing gracefully from her chair, "is that we did not understand what we were losing until it was too late." She moved to the viewport, her starlight dress flowing around her like liquid mercury. Beyond the glass, her crystalline ship waited, And now Marcus could see it was not alone. More ships were arriving, dozens of them, each one unique in its crystalline architecture, but all sharing that same melancholy pulsing light. We became perfect, Zara continued, her reflection ghost-like in the glass. Perfect in our logic, perfect in our efficiency, perfect in our knowledge. We solved the mysteries of physics, transcended the limitations of matter and energy, explored every corner of the galaxy. We became gods. But? Sarah prompted gently. Zara placed her palm against the viewport, and the glass beneath her touch began to shimmer with her inner light. But we discovered that perfection is another word for death. Without struggle, without loss, without the beautiful chaos of emotional experience, we began to fade. Not physically, but spiritually. Our consciousness started to dissipate into the quantum matrices we had merged with. Marcus felt his breath catch. You're dying. We are becoming nothing, Zara confirmed. In perhaps 50 of your years, the last of the ethereal collective will merge completely with the quantum field, becoming pure information without awareness. We will achieve perfect unity with the universe by ceasing to exist as individuals. The weight of her words settled over the room like a shroud. Marcus tried to imagine an entire civilization slowly dissolving into cosmic background noise. Brilliant. Minds fading into mathematical equations. And you think humanity can help how? Blake asked, his voice softer now, some of his suspicion replaced by reluctant sympathy. Zara turned back to face them, and Marcus saw something he hadn't expected, hope flickering in those ancient eyes. Because you still have what we lost. You still experience the full spectrum of emotional existence. You love, you hate, you fear, you hope. You create art for beauty's sake. You sacrifice yourselves for strangers. You fight wars over principles that have no logical foundation. You are everything we were before the great synthesis. Sarah's eyes widened. You want to learn how to feel again. More than that, Zara said, moving closer to the table. We need to bond with your species, to create connections that might allow some of us to remember what we once were before it is too late. Blake's hand moved back toward his weapon. Bond, how exactly? Because if you're talking about some kind of mental invasion— Not invasion, Zara interrupted, her voice taking on an urgent quality. Partnership. Voluntary emotional synthesis. Some of my people would need to form deep, lasting connections with humans, to share not just thoughts, but feelings, to remember what it means to experience joy, sorrow, passion. Her eyes fixed on Marcus again, and he felt something stir in his chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the station's environmental systems. The process would require the most intimate form of emotional bond possible between our species, Zara continued, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper, what humans call love, true, deep, committed love, the kind that changes both individuals fundamentally. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus could hear his own heartbeat, could feel the weight of Zara's gaze like a physical thing. He found himself leaning forward, drawn by something he couldn't name. Are you saying, Sarah said slowly, that you need to fall in love with humans to save your species? Yes, Zara replied simply. And we need humans to love us in return. Blake slammed his palm on the table. Absolutely not. I won't authorize some kind of alien breeding program on my watch. It would not be breeding, Zara said, her voice taking on a defensive edge. The ethereal do not reproduce as you do. This would be purely about emotional connection, about learning to feel again through the bond. Marcus found his voice at last. How many of your people are we talking about? Perhaps 100 of us remain coherent enough to attempt the bonding. The rest have already faded too far into the quantum field. Zara's form flickered slightly, as if her own coherence was more fragile than she wanted to admit. We would not force this upon anyone. The connections must be genuine, willing, chosen freely by both parties. And if it doesn't work? Blake demanded. If your experiment fails? Zara's shoulders sagged, and for a moment she looked terrifyingly fragile. Then the ethereal collective ends with my generation. The last of us will fade into the quantum background radiation, and the universe will forget we ever existed. Through the viewport, Marcus could see more crystal ships arriving, their lights pulsing in what he now realized might be a rhythm of desperate hope. Each ship carried beings who had transcended every limitation except the most important one, the ability to truly live. "There's something else," Zara said, her voice barely audible now. "Something I have not told you." She turned to look directly at Marcus, and the intensity of her gaze made him feel as if he were falling through space. "I have been monitoring your transmissions for 7 of your years. Not just the official communications, but the personal ones. I have listened to your conversations, your debates, your laughter. I have watched how you interact with your colleagues, how you treat those under your command, how you think through problems." Marcus felt his face flush. "You've been spying on us?" "Learning from you," Zara corrected. "And in the process I have developed what I believe you would call preferences. Emotional responses to certain individuals, responses that my kind thought were impossible." Blake stepped forward. "Get to the point." Zara's luminous eyes never left Marcus's face. "I have chosen who I wish to bond with, if the process is to be attempted. I have observed him for years, studied his character, admired his mind and his heart. And I believe I have already begun to experience what you call love." These words hung in the air like a challenge, like a confession, like a prayer. Marcus felt the world tilt around him as the implications crashed over him in waves. "Who?" he asked, though part of him already knew the answer. Zara stepped closer, close enough that he could see the galaxies of light swirling in her crystalline skin, close enough to feel the alien warmth radiating from her impossible form. "You, Marcus Chen," she said, her voice soft as starlight. "I wish you were my husband, human. I wish it more than I have wished for anything in 3,000 years of existence." Chapter 3. The Weight of Worlds. The silence that followed Zara's confession stretched like a taut wire, ready to snap at the slightest touch. Marcus felt as if the station's gravity had suddenly tripled, pinning him to his chair while his mind reeled through the implications of what she had just said. Blake was the first to break the silence, his voice sharp with authority. "Absolutely not. I won't allow it. This is a first contact situation, not a dating service." "Commander," Sarah interjected, her scientific mind already racing ahead, "consider what we're dealing with here. An entire species facing extinction, and we might be their only hope." "Their only hope involves one of my people entering into some kind of alien marriage," Blake shot back. "Do you understand the protocols we're violating? The risks?" Marcus found his voice at last, though it came out rough and uncertain. "What exactly would this bonding involve?" Zara moved closer to him, her movements fluid as water, graceful as a dancer. "It would require us to share not just thoughts, but emotional experiences. Your feelings would become mine, and mine yours. Over time, our consciousness would become partially intertwined, allowing me to experience the full spectrum of human emotion through our connection." "And the risks?" Marcus asked, trying to ignore the way his pulse quickened whenever she looked at him. "For you, the primary risk would be emotional overwhelm," Zara admitted. "My people experience emotions differently than humans. Our feelings, when we had them, were more intense, more complex. There is a possibility that sharing my emotional patterns could damage your psychological stability." Blake slammed his fist on the table. "There it is, you're talking about risking one of my people's sanity. What about the risks to you?" Marcus asked Zara, ignoring his commander's outburst. Zara's expression grew troubled. "For my people, the risk is even greater. If the bonding fails, if I cannot successfully integrate human emotional patterns, I will fade much faster than I would naturally. The attempt itself might accelerate my dissolution into the quantum field." "So you could die," Sarah said softly. "I could cease to exist," Zara corrected. "Death implies that something remains, a memory, a legacy, an impact on the world. If I fail, I will simply not be, as if I had never existed at all. Marcus stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. He walked to the viewport, staring out at the growing fleet of crystal ships. Each one represented lives hanging in the balance, an entire civilization balanced on the edge of extinction. "Why me?" he asked without turning around. "You've observed, all of us. Why did you choose me specifically?" He could hear the soft sound of Zara's footsteps as she approached, could smell something like ozone and starlight in the air around her. "Because of what I saw 7 months ago," she said quietly, "during the crisis with the mining colony on Europa." Marcus closed his eyes, remembering the accident that had trapped 30 miners in a collapsed tunnel, the impossible decision between trying a risky rescue or evacuating the remaining workers before the entire facility collapsed. "You chose to risk everything for 30 people you had never met," Zara continued. "When your superiors ordered you to abandon the rescue, you refused. You said that the lives of 30 miners were worth more than your career, more than your reputation, more than your personal safety." "Anyone would have done the same thing," Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. "No," Zara replied firmly. "They would not have. I observed the internal communications of 17 other colony managers during similar crises. 12 of them followed evacuation protocols and allowed trapped workers to die. 5 others attempted limited rescues but withdrew when the risks increased. Only you risked everything, including your own life, to save strangers." Marcus turned to face her, and was struck again by the alien beauty of her features, the way light seemed to dance beneath her crystalline skin. "You could have died in that tunnel collapse," Zara said. "You knew it, and you went in anyway, and when you brought out the last survivor, when you were sure everyone was safe, you collapsed from exhaustion and had to be hospitalized for 3 days. But the first thing you asked when you woke up was whether all 30 miners were safe." "I was just doing my job," Marcus protested. "No," Zara said, stepping closer still. "You were being human. You were demonstrating the emotional bonds that hold your species together, the capacity for self-sacrifice that my people have forgotten. You were being everything we need to learn to be again." Blake stepped between them, his face flushed with anger. "This is insane. Chen, you're not seriously considering this?" Marcus looked at his commander, then at Sarah, who was watching with the fascination of a scientist observing a unique phenomenon. Finally, his gaze returned to Zara, to those luminous eyes that held the weight of worlds. "What happens if I say no?" he asked. Zara's expression didn't change, but Marcus noticed the light beneath her skin dimmed slightly. "Then I will seek another partner, though I believe the chance of success would be significantly lower. And if no one agrees to try? Then in 50 years, perhaps less, the ethereal collective will fade into memory," Zara said simply. 3,000 years of evolution, of knowledge, of achievement, will become nothing more than background radiation in the quantum field. Marcus felt the weight of that responsibility settle on his shoulders like a lead blanket. An entire species, looking to him for salvation. The pressure was almost unbearable. "I need to know more," he said finally. "About the process, about what it would mean for both of us. About what happens if it works." Zara nodded slowly. "That is wise. The bonding process itself would take place over several weeks. We would begin with simple emotional sharing. I would experience your feelings as you have them, and you would feel echoes of my own experiences. Over time, the connection would deepen." "How deep?" Sarah asked, her notebook out, taking careful notes. "Eventually, we would share not just emotions but memories, dreams, hopes for the future. In your terminology, we would become soulmates. In the most literal sense, 2 consciousness partially merged while remaining individual." Blake shook his head. "And if Chen wants out? If he decides this is too much?" "The early stages of bonding can be reversed with no permanent effects," Zara assured him. "But once we reach full emotional synthesis, separation would be difficult for both of us. Not impossible, but painful enough that few would choose it willingly." Marcus walked back to the table and sat down heavily. "If this works, if we successfully, Bond and you learn to feel again what happens to the rest of your people. Those who are able would attempt similar bonds with other humans. Some might try to connect with multiple partners, creating emotional networks that could sustain larger numbers of my kind. Others might attempt connections with human art, with human culture, with the emotional resonances of your literature and music. And if it doesn't work? Zara was quiet for a long moment. Then we will have at least tried. And perhaps in the trying we will remember enough of what we once were to face our extinction with dignity. The weight of the decision pressed down on Marcus like the gravity of a dying star. Through the viewport he could see more ships arriving every hour, beings who had transcended every limitation except the most important one, now dependent on the emotional generosity of a species they barely understood. I need time to think, he said finally. Time is something we have very little of, Zara replied. Each day of delay means more of my people fade beyond the point where bonding is possible, and each day I wait, my own coherence becomes more fragile. Marcus looked at her again, really looked at her, trying to see past the alien beauty to the desperate intelligence beneath. What he saw there made his heart ache, a being who had sacrificed everything for perfection, only to discover that perfection was indistinguishable from death. One more question, he said. Do you actually want this? Not for your species, not for the survival of your people, but for yourself. Do you want to bond with me? Zara's composure finally cracked. Her crystalline features shifted, becoming more fluid, more vulnerable. The light beneath her skin pulsed faster, and when she spoke, her voice carried harmonics of longing that made Marcus's chest tight. I have spent 7 years learning what it means to want something, she said. Learning the difference between logical necessity and emotional desire. And yes, Marcus Chen, I want this. I want to feel what you feel, to share your joys and your sorrows, to know what it means to love and be loved in return. I want it more than I have wanted anything in 3 millennia of existence. The admission hung in the air between them, raw and honest and terrible in its vulnerability. Marcus felt something shift inside him, a recognition that went deeper than logic or duty or fear. Give me 12 hours, he said finally. 12 hours to think, to prepare, to understand what I'm choosing. Zara nodded, though he could see the effort it cost her to wait even that long. 12 hours. But know this, Marcus Chen. Whatever you choose, I will remember that a human was willing to consider sacrificing his own peace of mind for beings he had never met. That alone proves that your species possesses something worth preserving. Zara turned to leave, her crystalline form beginning to fade back toward her ship. Marcus called out to her. Zara? She paused, looking back at him. If we do this, if we bond successfully, what happens then? Do you stay on Earth? Do I go with you to the stars? What does the future look like? For the first time since her arrival, Zara smiled. It was a tentative expression, uncertain as if she were rediscovering how to arrange her features for joy. But it transformed her alien beauty into something warm and achingly familiar. Then we write that future together, she said. 2 minds, 2 hearts exploring what it means to love across the vast emptiness between worlds. With that, she was gone, leaving only the faint scent of starlight and the weight of an impossible choice. Chapter 4. The bridge between worlds. Marcus hadn't slept in 18 hours. He stood in his private quarters, staring at his reflection in the small mirror above his sink. The man looking back at him appeared older than his 35 years, with dark circles under brown eyes and stress lines etched around his mouth. In 12 hours, he would make a decision that could save an entire species or destroy his own sanity. A soft chime announced a visitor. Marcus opened the door to find Sarah holding 2 cups of coffee and wearing the expression of someone who had been doing serious thinking. Figured you might need this, she said, offering him one of the cups. Marcus accepted it gratefully, inhaling the bitter aroma. Can't sleep either. Too much to process. Sarah entered his quarters and settled into the single chair while Marcus sat on the edge of his bed. I've been running calculations all night. What kind of calculations? Sarah pulled out her tablet, her fingers dancing across the screen. Risk assessments mostly. The probability of successful bonding based on what Zara told us. The potential consequences for human-alien relations. The implications for our understanding of consciousness itself. And mathematically speaking, this is either the greatest opportunity in human history or the most dangerous gamble ever attempted. Sarah looked up from her tablet, her green eyes serious. The potential benefits are staggering, Marcus. If we can help even some of the ethereal survive, think about what they could teach us. Physics beyond our understanding. Technology that makes our best efforts look like stone tools. Insights into the nature of consciousness itself. Marcus sipped his coffee, letting the caffeine work its way into his system. And the risks? Psychological integration disorders, potential loss of individual identity, possible contamination of human emotional patterns by alien thought processes. Sarah set down her tablet and leaned forward. But Marcus, I've been studying Zara's responses during our conversation. Her body language, her speech patterns, the way she interacts with our environment. What did you find? She's already more human than she realizes, Sarah said. The way she chose her words when talking to Blake, the defensive postures when he challenged her, the hope in her voice when she talked about the future. These aren't the responses of a purely logical being. She's already started feeling again, just from observing us. Marcus felt something twist in his chest. Which means the bonding might work. Or it means she's already too far along the path to pure emotion to maintain the balance necessary for success. Sarah's expression grew troubled. Marcus, there's something else. I've been monitoring the quantum signatures from their ships. And? They're fluctuating. Not randomly, but in patterns that suggest emotional responses. Fear, hope, anticipation. The entire fleet is experiencing some form of collective anxiety about whether this will work. Marcus stood and walked to his small viewport. In the distance, the ethereal fleet hung in space like a collection of crystalline dreams, each ship pulsing with its own rhythm of desperate hope. Have you decided? Sarah asked softly. I think so, Marcus replied, not turning from the window. But first I need to ask you something as a friend, not as a colleague. Anything. Marcus turned to face her. Do you think I'm capable of loving someone who isn't human? Sarah was quiet for a long moment, considering the question seriously. I think you're capable of loving anyone who needs love, she said finally. That's who you've always been, Marcus. Remember when you adopted that stray cat on Mars base? You spent 3 months nursing it back to health, even though regulations said you should have had it destroyed. That was different, was it? You saw something vulnerable and alone, and your first instinct was to protect it, to care for it. Sarah smiled softly. Zara isn't that different. She's vulnerable and alone and very far from home. The only difference is that she's asking for emotional care instead of medical care. A new chime sounded, deeper and more resonant than the station's usual alerts. Through his viewport, Marcus could see one of the crystal ships moving closer, its surface brightening. She's early, Marcus said. Or maybe you're ready, Sarah replied, standing and moving toward the door. Whatever you decide, Marcus, know that you're not going into this alone. Blake and I will monitor the process every step of the way. If anything goes wrong, we'll find a way to help you. After Sarah left, Marcus spent another hour in meditation, trying to center himself for what was to come. When he finally made his way to the observation deck, he found Zara waiting for him in the crystal corridor that had somehow become a permanent part of the station's architecture. She looked different than before, more solid somehow, more present. The flowing garment of starlight had been replaced by something that looked almost like a human dress, though it still shimmered with otherworldly light. Her crystalline features had softened slightly, becoming more familiar, more approachable. You have made your choice, she said, and it wasn't a question. Yes, Marcus replied, stepping into the corridor. The walls around him pulsed with gentle light, and he could feel a subtle vibration through the soles of his feet, as if the entire structure was alive and breathing. And? Marcus took a deep breath, feeling the weight of worlds settle on his shoulders. I'll do it. I'll try to bond with you, The light in the corridor brightened noticeably, and Marcus realized that Zara's emotional state was reflected in her environment. Joy, relief, and something deeper, gratitude, flowed through the crystalline walls. "Thank you," Zara said. Her voice thick with harmonics Marcus was beginning to understand were the ethereal equivalent of tears. "You cannot know what this means to my people." "What does it mean to you?" Marcus asked, moving closer to her. Zara's luminous eyes met his, and in their depths he saw galaxies of possibility, vast spaces of hope and fear and desperate longing. "It means I might learn to live again," she said simply. Marcus reached out slowly, giving her time to withdraw if she wanted to. When she didn't, he gently took her hand in his. Her skin was warm and strangely textured, like silk that had been woven from moonbeams. At the moment of contact, he felt a small electric shock followed by a wave of emotion that wasn't quite his own, wonder. That was the first thing he felt from her, pure childlike wonder at the simple human gesture of holding hands. It was followed quickly by gratitude so profound it made his knees weak. "Is this how it begins?" he asked. "This is how it begins," Zara confirmed. "With touch, with simple contact between two conscious beings who choose to trust each other." As they stood there in the crystal corridor, hands linked, Marcus felt the first tentative threads of connection forming between them. It was nothing dramatic, nothing overwhelming, just a gentle awareness that he was no longer entirely alone in his own mind. Behind them, through the viewport, the ethereal fleet pulsed with renewed light. In the observation deck, Sarah and Blake monitored readings that showed quantum fluctuations unlike anything in their databases. And in the space between two very different kinds of consciousness, something new began to grow, fragile as a newborn star but bright with infinite possibility. "What happens now?" Marcus asked. Zara squeezed his hand gently, and through their emerging connection, he felt her smile like sunshine after rain. "Now we learn what it means to love across the vast emptiness between worlds," she said. "And in learning, we both become something new." The bonding had begun.